Have you ever been told you just need more faith when you're feeling anxious or stressed or overwhelmed? Well, what if your faith isn't the issue? What if it's your nervous system? Faith matters deeply, but it doesn't work the way we sometimes think it does. You just need more faith? That's not helpful. And in this video, we will explain why. Stay tuned. There is a common message in Christian circles that if you just trusted God more, you wouldn't feel this way. And this falls short of biblical truth and it creates confusion between spiritual truth and biological processes. But here's the truth. You can deeply trust God and still have a dysregulated nervous system. Here's what's actually happening in our brain and in our body. When we are under stress or when we are dealing with unresolved trauma, both of these reduce what we call brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. And BDNF is a really critical neuromodulator. It is responsible for a number of things, but one of the things that it does is it acts in the memory and learning centers of the brain for neuroplasticity. So we need it to learn new ways of being, new ways of thinking, and new ways of regulating. So when we have a reduction in brain-derived neurotrophic factor or BDNF because of stress, because of trauma that our brains and our nervous system are still working through, then it's more difficult. It takes longer for us to learn those new ways of being. And this is one of the primary reasons why a comment like, you just need more faith, isn't very helpful. Remember, anything that triggers fight or flight responses, freeze and surrender responses, fawning responses, anything that activates our nervous system, the parasympathetic side of our nervous system, or the alert, the threat alarm in our bodies, is going to potentially reduce that brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And these are automatic responses to perceived threat in the environment. They're not choices that we make. We don't cognitively decide to go into fight and flight, for example. Once the amygdala detects a threat, that parasympathetic nervous system kicks on, potentially decreasing then that neuromodulator that we need for learning and memory. It also takes our prefrontal cortex offline. Remember, the prefrontal cortex is where we make decisions. It's where reasoning happens and perspective taking. It's also where empathy for ourselves and others is activated. And so when that goes offline, we lose all of that. And at that point, it's our nervous system that begins to take over. In moments of stress, your body is reacting faster than your beliefs or your faith can process. So, how come faith by itself can't just flip the switch and we automatically feel better? Well, remember that faith is relational and it's cognitive. Regulation in the nervous system, that's physiological. It's your biology. You cannot completely think your way out of a body that feels unsafe in its current environment. So, thought patterns, prayer, meditation, these things definitely do help. But the help that these practices provide isn't instantaneous. So, for example, you may be absolutely certain God is in control, but your body still might feel anxious, tense, or overwhelmed. And the problem with oversimplified advice, like just have more faith, is that it can lead to a sense of shame. Something must be wrong with me spiritually. Or it might lead to suppression. I'm not supposed to feel this way, so I'm going to push it down. And as I've talked about in many of my videos, the science tells us when we try to push those feelings down, they actually intensify because it is not good for us to ignore those real internal signals. And if it's not shame, if it's not suppression, It might also manifest itself in a feeling of disconnection. When we try not to feel that way, or when we think we're bad for feeling that way, we become disconnected from ourselves and disconnected from God. It doesn't produce healing, these statements. Instead, it produces pressure. And when I think about distress biblically, I often think about Jesus. I think about him in Gethsemane as he sat in the garden, as he prayed in the garden. He cried out, Father, not my will, but yours be done. And I kind of paraphrase this to myself, something I borrowed from a friend of mine. Oh, Father, I'd rather not. Is there any other way? I'd really rather not. He was in such great distress that he sweat drops of blood. Now, I have been pretty stressed out at times in my life. I've gone through severe grief. I have moaned in my spirit in such horrible pain I didn't think I'd survive. But I have never been so distressed that I sweat drops of blood. It makes me wonder how distressed he was in the garden. But he's giving us an honest expression of how he really, really feels. It is a wonderful picture of what it means to be fully human. But with those words, not my will, Father, but yours, he surrendered with and through that emotional process. And he gives us an example of how we can do the same. As he wrestled with those emotions, he didn't suppress them, he didn't self censor out of shame, or he didn't pull away from his Father, but he leaned into it, and that strengthened him. And this is a model we can build on. We might not instantly get to the place of trust that Jesus was in the garden, but with time and with practice and walking in the grace that the Father has already given us, we can get there despite deep distress. Because what actually helps is learning to regulate our nervous system in our faith journey, putting regulation and faith together. It's not either or, it's both and. So I want to give you some practical steps to help with this. Step number one, learn to regulate your body. This requires slow breath work. It requires grounding exercises, being able to be in touch with your senses and in the present moment rather than thinking about what just happened or what has happened in the past or being worried about what's going to happen in the future, but being present in the moment. Movement, physical movement absolutely helps. Stretching, nature walks, gratitude walks, things you've heard me talk about before. You want to learn to calm the body so that the mind can engage with truth. Step number two, apply the truth. Add scripture to all of these internal conversations that you have with yourself as you wrestle through anxiety or distress, as you wrestle with your own faith. Use scripture, use prayer. Think of your prayer practice as an ongoing conversation with the Father who loves you, with the Son who died in your place and took your penalty upon himself. Use reframing. So much of the time, if not all of the time, what we're reacting to is not what happened to us, but what we are telling ourselves about what happened to us. And the simple truth is, as we reframe the narrative, that begins to calm our nervous system. As we remind ourselves that we might feel out of control, but God's never out of control. We might have been caught off guard by the circumstances, but God's not caught off guard by them. And as we begin to reframe, we start to regulate. And that opens us up to absorb more truth because truth lands differently in a regulated nervous system. So practice this often and especially practice these things when your nervous system is more at rest. Don't wait until you're completely overwhelmed to start to have a conversation with God about your anxiety or your nervous system. Do it when you are in your best states so that you can develop skills that you can lean on in your most vulnerable places. Step number three, learn to integrate the two. Learn to speak truth while calming your body and your nervous system. Learn to pair scripture with breath work, learning to breathe in and breathe out slowly as you're absorbing scriptures, as you're absorbing the word of truth. One of the easy ways to do this is to inhale as you read part of a scripture, half a verse, say, and then exhale as you're reflecting on what that means for your life and how it applies. Remember, faith is not the absence of a stress response. Faith is choosing trust within your human limitations. Having faith doesn't mean you instantly calm down the moment something stressful happens. What faith does mean is returning to God again and again and again, moment by moment, in every circumstance. If you have been told to just have more faith and it didn't help, there's a reason. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God designed your body and your brain, and He patiently works through both when we trust Him to do so. I hope this has been helpful for you. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.